Hi, I'm Carissa Foco.
And I'm Gary Younge.
Each week, Gary and I will be talking about those stories in the news that are overreported and the ones that are going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough.
This is Over the Top, Under the Radar. So, Caris, how you been? Been your birthday?
It was my birthday, that's true. Had a small function, very small, wore a lot of sequins.
I saw that there was a choice afoot about there was a very, very puffy, looked like a bridesmaid's dress, actually.
Oh, it was way better than a bridesmaid's dress. It was like a sort of pink, fluffy flower, if that were a dress. I feel like, when do you get to dress up if not on your birthday? And I quite like dressing up, but my life does not really require me to wear anything other than jeans and trainers. So
my life barely demands that I wear trousers.
That's a lifestyle choice, Gary, and one that not everyone approves of. For those who haven't met Gary in real life, if you knock on his front door, he will 50% of the time be wearing trousers, but 50% not.
It's my door.
Yeah, it's said without comment. I'm just giving the listeners a bit of context on your lifestyle choices.
It's my door, my rules.
Well, we've got lots to get into this week. It's been a week. Before we get into like the overs, the unders, the listener letters, what is going on with George W. Bush? Because he doesn't look well.
Expand.
He's got like quite a pink, puffy face. Have you seen him?
No, I didn't see him.
He looked like, obviously there's a lot. I mean, we will talk about the inauguration. I have other things to say. But he looked like he was high. He was giggling a lot. And then B, he's had a bit of a like, if he were a different famous person, I would be like, have you had fillers?
I do remember, I wasn't there, but apparently the first Trump inauguration, after Trump's speech, he turned to Michelle Obama, I think, and said, that was some weird shit. Which I kind of,
Yeah, him was Barack or Michelle. No, that was some weird shit. I mean, yeah, kind of the epitaph for what we're going through. We've got some messages from listeners. Someone from Blue Sky, Dr. Mark, please follow us on Blue Sky if you're on the platform. Do have a listen to Carissa Foco and Gary Younge on this week's Over Under pod, particularly but not limited to the excellent analysis of how we should think about the Gaza ceasefire. Brilliant as always.
Thank you, Mark.
Get in touch. We love to hear from you. We're all over social media, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. You just got to search for @over_under_pod_.
A big shout out to the people who signed up to Patreon. We are up against the Murdochs and the BBC, the Guardian, well-funded media operations. We are run by a small, Black-owned indie. We need you to support us. If you're enjoying this, if you want it to continue, then we really need your support. Big thank you to our new sign-ups, Jody, Tom, Lorraine, Rory, Omar, and Hannah. Thanks so much to all of you. Your contributions are really appreciated.
We have 411 Patreon supporters at the moment, which is amazing. And we're so grateful to each and every one of you, especially those of you that are making a donation. We are trying to get to 500 Patreon supporters by the end of February to help us cover the cost of making the podcast.
Packages start at just £5 plus VAT a month. So if you want to keep the show running, access bonus episodes, weekly newsletter, exclusive over-under WhatsApp community, search Over the Top, Under the Radar on Patreon and put your money where your ears are.
So what's on the docket for this week, Gary?
I want to talk about the presidential pardoning of Marcus Messiah Garvey and the plan by the government to withdraw your driving license if you don't pay back whatever you're supposed to owe from welfare.
I will be talking about that moment in the inauguration with Elon Musk and Joe Biden's parting words to the American people.
So,
should we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So my over the top, the story that I want to word this carefully. I don't think the story has had too much coverage, but I think the tone of the coverage has missed a few key points. And I think it would be hard if you've been online or indeed consuming news media this week not to have spotted or heard about Elon Musk's Nazi salute. Donald J. Trump was inaugurated this week. He is now the 47th president of the United States. The inauguration is very much a lot of pageantry, isn't it? There's the formal ceremony, there are the balls and the parties. I think there was a crypto ball this year, which I think Snoop Dogg was at, which we need to look into that one. It's maybe another episode. At one of the rallies, Elon Musk, Donald Trump mega donor, owner of the platform X, all-round git, to borrow your language, is speaking to the crowd and does what, when you watch the video, looks pretty much like a Nazi salute. And he does it twice. So he taps his chest and he puts his arm up in what some might call the Sieg Heil. But here are some of the things the media have called it. A one-arm gesture, a fascist-style salute, a Roman salute. Also, students of history will know that the Nazi salute actually comes from the Roman salute, and it was Mussolini's fascists who pioneered it. And you'll have to tell me, as a journalist, if you think this is about legal fears. The first thing is the slight, I don't use this word lightly, but the slight gaslighting. I saw the still and I was like, let me watch the video. I watched the video and I was like, wow, bro just did a Nazi salute twice. So it's not as ambiguous as a lot of media outlets are making it out. And I think for people listening to this show and people in the over-under community, I'm just going to give you the respect of not even bothering to try and prove that. We know what he did. We saw what he did. There were cameras. I think the second thing that really annoys me about it is this wave of attempts to defend him. One of the defensive was autism. Don't talk to me about what these people's politics are when it comes to neurodivergence and autism and the number of people in the MAGA camp who believe you can cure it. Also, hugely insulting to people on the autistic spectrum. And I think that kind of connects to the bigger point that if you or I were caught on camera doing what looked like a Nazi salute, not once, but twice, to roars and cheers, we'd probably be quite quick to just distance ourselves from it. We'd probably be like, hey, huge mistake. I was drunk, was trying to dab. Elon Musk didn't deny what happened. So his response was, frankly, they need better dirty tricks. That everyone is Hitler attack is so tired. And let's be real. We all know what happened here. Those of us with eyes know he did it. Those of us who know his politics know that he supports the AfD. He's got a long history and a pretty public timeline of support for far-right causes. He's part of the MAGA movement. One of the guys that just got released for the January 6th riots was also accused of doing the Sieg Heil, the Nazi gesture. So one-arm gesture, come on, that's weak. We know what he did.
Yeah. First of all, I think the video is the point. I think that the still could show you hailing a bus or whatever. And once you see the video and the fact that he did it twice, it's it reminds me, the response reminds me of the line in Chicago, the film play. Someone tells a story about the Billy Flynn character being caught in bed with two women, and his wife comes in and she's outraged. And he says to her, who are you going to believe, your own eyes or me? And she can see him there with these two women. And it's look, it's as clear as day. Because it's so extraordinary, the media are right, I think, to say, and because he's going to deny it, which he does, to say, okay, let's break that down. Let's just make sure that is a Nazi salute. I don't think they're right to be to euphemize it, but they're right to interrogate it. And that's partly because of the gravity of what he's done, and partly because, frankly, I'm sure, well, I'll own it, I'm sure I'm responsible, but, that I do this sometimes, that the Hitler reference is overdone and the Nazi term is overused, even if as time goes on, it becomes more and more appropriate. And that sometimes we don't have to define things by all the way back then. We can talk about the way they are now. So for those reasons, I think that the media are right to interrogate it. But as you say, it is what it is. We can all see it. If you don't want to look like a Nazi, don't back people who are excusing Nazis. Don't be part of a movement that, among other things, just pardoned a guy who stormed into the White House with a Camp Auschwitz t-shirt on. That, like, there are a bunch of other things that would go alongside him doing this that makes it more plausible rather than less. And of course, that movement, that group of people will be like, oh, this is another slur on us and so on, because that's what they do. But it's important to call it what it is.
I kind of want the final word on the Elon Nazi salute stuff to go to Elon's daughter, Vivian Wilson, who happens to be trans. There's something quite joyful when like famous people's kids like come for them on the internet, because often they do it in quite a like savvy and savage way. I do believe that Vivian Wilson is estranged from her father, but she had a pretty good parody of what's happened on Threads, I believe, where she said, I'm just going to say, let's call a spade an effing spade, especially if there were two spades done in succession based on the reaction of the first spade. And then when people responded, was like, I don't know why you're reacting with such vigor. I'm clearly just talking about card suits. I have ADHD. This was clearly just an accident. And yeah, the sort of post ends by being like, for those who can read between the lines, do you understand how easy it is to do this? Plausible deniability, honey. Just saying. So yeah, I'm with Vivian. Like, let's not play his games. We know what he did. We saw what he did.
Yeah, I love the idea of kids trolling their dad until, you know,
until it's
my
you,
kids
Gary.
troll.
You've
Yeah.
got to watch out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
there was a good.
They troll me privately all the time, but
I know, when they take it public.
Yeah.
For the rest of us, it's a real popcorn moment.
So my under the radar is a government statement earlier this week suggesting that convicted benefit cheats, their words, not mine, who fail to pay whatever they owe could be stripped of their driving licenses. If they have debts of £1,000 or more, they could be punished with a driving ban of up to 2 years. This was the Work and Pensions Minister, Alison McGovern. Here's the thing, is like, I actually believe if we lived in a more equitable, more socialist style system, this would be more of a problem for me. People taking money from the public key that arguably they're not entitled to, that money could be going elsewhere. They say, according to annual figures, fraud amounts to 7 billion last year, or 2.8% of total welfare spending. It's not that it can never be a thing. And a few things. The punching down, the signaling of this government that is the problem is obscene. It's obscene and it's wrong. There's an awful lot of money that we're talking about opportunity costs. This isn't a statement about the war in Ukraine, but it's a statement about money. We spent 7.8 billion in military support for the Ukraine. We spent 5 billion in non-military support for the Ukraine. So they can always find money for some stuff. And then there's just a general messaging about who or what is really the problem in this oligarchic moment where rich people are making off like bandits, where they have a budget where a higher earner like myself doesn't feel it at all. And then they go for people who probably don't have enough money to live on. Our welfare state is in such a poor state, and think somehow characterize them as a problem. The reason this is a problem for all of us is because if they got rid of all welfare fraud, all of it, if they found a way, we'd still be in a hell of a mess. We'd still be in a hell of a mess. So it's not going to actually make anybody feel any better. It's not actually going to solve any kind of problem. So that is my under the radar.
Completely went under my radar. So I'm glad that you brought it to the podcast this week. I think there's a few things. I am with you that I don't believe that there shouldn't be any penalties for breaking the law or committing fraud. I think, and I don't have all of the most up-to-date numbers, for most of my adult life, benefits in the UK have been underclaimed or unclaimed, like certainly disability benefits. There's the bare fact of benefit fraud exists, but it's not on the scale that you would believe given the amount of media attention that it gets. But I do think there's something quite sinister about removing someone's driving license. I genuinely don't understand the through line. And if you need your car to pick up your kids, or maybe you're a taxi driver, like to earn a living, you are allowed to work and be in receipt of benefits. You live somewhere without public transport. Like, it feels unnecessarily cruel. Like, it doesn't recoup money to deny people their driving licenses. For me, it just is another example of this trap that some progressives fall into around who's demonized and these ideas of like undeserving poor. As long as you were talking about being tough on immigrants and tough on benefits claimants, you are perpetuating right-wing ideas. And even if it generates some headlines in the Sun in the short term, like in the long term, the logic of that argument is you need a right-wing party in power because no one's going to kick benefit claimants and immigrants like Reform or the Tories. There are very few people who sat on universal credit or any other benefits that are like having a great time. And it ignores the fact that really the job of the government should be creating good jobs for people that pay well. If we really wanted to talk about fraud, what about all those people who got issued PPE contracts because they were mates with Matt Hancock or they looked at him friendly once? Like, did we recruit the money from that? If we need money, that's more money. And I'm not saying the government isn't doing any of that, but yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, odd one, weird one.
There is, I think it's called UK Tax. There is an organisation that put out a thing sometime last year saying, these are the 5 taxes. This is kind of what is interesting sometimes about these centrist governments. These are the kind of taxes that you really should be closing down. And the government actually has, in terms of capital gains and inheritance, actually has moved on those. But when it moves on those and people complain, they're like, no, we're not doing anything. We're just kind of, it's okay. It's okay. We're not going crazy. We're not. But when it comes to them hitting the poor, they're like, yeah, we're going to fucking hit the poor. This is punitive. It offers no support or redemption. If that's what you've done and that is the punishment, then you are not going to be in a better place in order to be able to pay that back. So all you're doing is hitting poor people, saying poor people are the problem, and creating a narrative that, as you suggest, actually fuels your enemies and not yourself.
My under the radar happened last week, but it happened after we'd recorded the podcast. Joe Biden gave his final address as president, like a sort of, sat behind a desk to camera. And I nearly didn't do this because I don't want to kick Joe when he's down. But there was just something about it that rankled. So I'm going to tell you the bit that annoyed me. So Joe Biden says, today an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that really threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedom. And then he goes on to talk about the potential rise of a tech industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. He talks about misinformation, the crumbling free press. It does become a little bit like a kind of rambly granddad list, but I mean, yeah, I won't say more on that. And then obviously the visuals of Trump's inauguration this week, I mean, it's not a shock this guy worked in TV for so long with The Apprentice. The line of tech billionaires from Mark Zuckerberg to Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Sundar Pichai from Google, I believe Tim Cook from Apple was there, although he wasn't as much in shot. Lots of people remarked on the fact they were kind of front row before a lot of the cabinet picks. So I guess at first glance, you could say that Biden's right. I just can't let this one slide. First of all, bro, you were, until a couple of days ago, president. And before that, vice president. And before that, from 1973 to 2009, you were a United States senator. So the way that he's sort of talking about an oligarchy in America and the rise of the tech industrial complex, like he has had no access to the levers of power to address this. It just grinds my gears. In the time that Joe Biden has been in political life, and I'm not saying he's done nothing at all to try and improve American society, but the wealth gap between America's richest and poorest families more than doubled when you look at 1989 to 2016. The wealthiest 1% of Americans held nearly 35% of the nation's wealth. So the top 5% of households in America used to have 16% of the sort of total income. In 2018, the top 5% of households had 23% of the total income in America. The idea that today an oligarchy is taking shape in America is hot, salty garbage. America is an incredibly unequal country. It has been for decades and on Joe Biden's watch. And then the second thing, which I again don't want to have to say, but I'm going to have to do it. Trump is responsible for a lot of horrible things. And I'm sure he will do a lot of horrible things in the next 4 years. He is not responsible for the American oligarchy or the tech industrial complex. I'm not even sure Bro understands the tech sector well enough to have contributed to its growth in power. Like, Jeff Bezos was worth $10 billion in 1999. He is now worth $196 billion, depending on, how his various assets fluctuate. And he was allowed to buy the Washington Post, a major newspaper. One of Joe's many complaints is the free press is crumbling. So these tech billionaires have been allowed to amass wealth and power on the Democrats' watch, as well as the Republicans. It's really hard to kind of underestimate how much wealth and power they have and how much political clout that they have. Like, Axios estimated that the 2024 lobbying spend of the companies that you saw on the stage was, so not all of the technology industry, just Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, $85.6 million spent on lobbying. That's not donations to candidates. That's not all of the money that they've spent shoring up their position. That's just on activity that counts as lobbying that they declared. So goodbye to Joe Biden. I'm sure he'll have a nice retirement with Jill and, maybe do some lecturing. But for me, the thing that went under the radar was less the comments about the oligarchs, but just like the thing that we have to reckon with if we want a response to the far right. And I want a response. We need a response, which is that progressive or left or centre governments have been complicit in the rise in economic inequality and have allowed these tech barons to grow in wealth and power. I don't want to be coming through like having a go at octogenarians, but there was something about that speech and the lack of self-awareness and humility that I was just like, nah, I'm not, this isn't okay. I'm not happy. No, Joe, it's a no from me.
You touched on something, or you center on something really important there, I think, in our understanding of Trump. Well, in our understanding of the polity, I guess, which is Trump doesn't invent this oligarchic moment. He amplifies it. He's an accelerant for it. He's a catalyst for it. He's a conduit for it. But he didn't invent it. Even close to home, I remember an interview with Blair where Blair says that the issue is poverty, not inequality. Under Clinton, poverty did go down, but inequality did go up. In the same way that Trump doesn't invent racism in American politics. There was a Nixon strategy. The problem's the blacks. The issue is not saying it. You got Bill Clinton flying back to Arkansas to be present in the state for Ricky Ray Rector's execution. Ricky Ray Rector, African-American man, partly lobotomized, serious mental health issues, who leaves the dessert of his last meal for later. So that's the condition he's in. And Clinton flies back to Arkansas to make sure that nobody can ever say that he was soft on crime. Trump doesn't introduce these things. And that is kind of, in a sense, what gives him his authenticity. Because he's like, these people, they fuck around with this stuff. They fuck around with the racism. They mess about with the oligarchy. I'm the real deal. I'll give you racism. I'll give you oligarchy. What do you want? What do you want? I'll give it to you. I'll give it all to you. Which doesn't mean that this is not a new phase and an accelerated phase in that development, but that he is the product in many ways of the world that those centrists have created. If we're going to work out how we get out of this situation, then there has to be an understanding of how we got into it.
I'm not going to pretend that it's easy to take on rich and powerful people, or that, in Joe Biden's 4-year term, he could have taken America from being the least equal country in the G7 by most measures to some socialist paradise. But we haven't even really been trying. We haven't been starting the conversation from a position of all these billionaires got to go. We can't have a fair society when people amass this amount of wealth at the expense of the people that they employ. People don't feel good about economic inequality. They don't feel good about all these billionaires that own hugely powerful social media platforms and sometimes traditional media outlets, and they're able to like put the thumb on the scales of our politics. There are a lot of people that see how the world functions and don't think it's fair, and don't believe that it's because of immigrants and poor people.
So my over the top was the pardoning. We're back with Joe Biden again. This was a good thing that he did, but bear with me. The pardoning of Marcus Messiah Garvey by Joe Biden. Now, for those of you who don't know, Marcus Messiah Garvey, one of the most influential Black nationalist leaders of not just his time, but all time, ran the United Negro Improvement Association, which amassed a huge membership in several countries. He led a Back to Africa movement, up ye mighty race. That was one of his kind of phrases. Central to his message was the uplift of Black people and the notion that we should return to Africa and build Africa as a great continent and so on. I'm going to say up front that the root of Marcus Garvey's politics are not my politics in terms of nationalism, Black capitalism, and so on. But I also, given the time that he emerged and the message that he gave, I'm grateful and indebted to his kind of contribution in terms of pushback in a time of like really brutal colonialism and saying, no, not us. We're better than this. Get your foot off our neck. We can do it for ourselves. So in 1923, Marcus Garvey was convicted on a single count of mail fraud. He was president of the shipping and passenger company called the Black Star Line. So he was all in favor of Black people building their own businesses and their companies. This was one of them. He was convicted for using the mail to defraud someone into buying stock in the company. And for that conviction, he received the maximum punishment under the law of 5 years and $1,000 fine. Now, a couple of things we have to know about that. Garvey was a major anti-racist force, and therefore he was in the sights of the establishment. J. Edgar Hoover, director of FBI, had been looking for reasons to deport Garvey because Garvey was born in Jamaica as an undesirable alien. He served 2 of his 5 years in the sentence, which was then commuted by President Calvin Coolidge, and he was forced to leave the country, deported to Jamaica. So here's a few things about that pardoning. So now he's been pardoned from that. The first, and we have to be careful the way that we talk about these things, otherwise there can be too many babies with the bathwater. I'm glad that it happened. I'm glad that he was pardoned because the original conviction was an outrage and was clearly politically motivated. I salute both the academic Julian Hansford and Garvey's son, Julius Garvey, MD, for the work that they did in making this happen. So it's a good thing that happened. It's also a terrible sop, right? That in a letter from the Congressional Black Caucus, they say exonerating him would honor his work for the Black community, tick, remove the shadow of an unjust conviction, tick, and further your administration's promise to advance racial justice. Horseshit. This is a sop. This is what they do. In the year of the Windrush scandal, they give us Windrush Day. It's like, oh, sorry about deporting, pauperizing, removing healthcare, getting evicted your elderly relatives and seniors in your community. Here's a day. We're going to have a day. We're going to have a statue. We're going to have this or that. It's like, yeah, okay. Okay, thanks for the statue. Thanks for the day. Can you stop beating us up? And it's not like anybody seriously ever believed that he was guilty of those things. It's a bit like Nelson Mandela being released, saying, right, we're going to exonerate Nelson Mandela for the crimes that he committed. It's like, well, he didn't really commit a crime, did he? Final point, there's been a lot of pardons out there, man. And when we, Joe Biden pardoned, as well as just his son, who had actually committed a crime, he pardoned like loads of members of his family. He pardoned them for anything they might do. And there was a reason for it because he feared that Trump would come for him. But Trump's going to come for someone. And the idea that like, well, at least my folk are okay. Trump pardoned pretty much everybody who's involved in January the 6th, including like paid up bloody Nazis with the Auschwitz t-shirts and the 6 million lies, memes and all of that. So then when one locates Marcus Messiah Garvey within the group of people who were pardoned, you're like, no, you need some separate kind of pardoning process for actually people who matter, who we care about, who aren't part of your kind of back and forth. I'm glad it happened. It shouldn't have had to happen. And these things should not be tied to racial justice in this moment. And when I look out and I see the pardons in there, I think, yeah, some people are standing taller than others.
It's an interesting one, right? Also, like, there's something materially different to pardoning someone who is deceased, and in Marcus Garvey's case, has been deceased for some time, like 1940, I think, is when he died. Even that sense of, it's different pardoning Fauci, who I'm sort of also glad about that one, who's alive and whom Trump might come for, and Marcus Garvey. But I guess I think of it a bit like the Alan Turing pardon, the Second World War code breaker who's gay and like chemically castrated. I think there's like a lot of power in the symbolism, and it means that we get to say the names of people who are part of our legacy and history. So I think I'm with you in terms of it's a good thing to do. And I think for campaigners, I don't know if they're like family members in the case of Marcus Garvey, but also for, yeah, maybe a lot of us don't hold a lot of stock with parts of the criminal justice system, especially in terms of Black liberation leaders. Whether you subscribe to all of their politics, they have been systematically demonized and criminalized for their politics. So I think there is a righting of the wrong when that happens. And I think for the campaigners who've worked so hard for it, this is symbolic and symbols matter. Where I really agree with you is Marcus Garvey's politics aren't my politics, although increasingly my dad's kind of summons back to Africa does have more of an appeal. The darker stuff gets over here. But yeah, I think it's interesting having heroes where you don't believe in all of their politics, but you are glad that they existed and aware that they were powerful symbols.
I mean, I get there is something about correcting the historical record, and the amount of time that they leave before they do these things actually tells a story. It's like, well, who does it challenge now to pardon Marcus Garvey? The point is that at the time, in the moment when he was a threat, in the moment when he was there, they took him out. So we get to a point now where we have to tell people who he was before we tell him why it's significant. And at that point, they say, yeah, okay, my bad. And so I've got a problem with that, because they will be putting the heirs of Marcus Garvey into prison in a range of ways, people who will be challenging the system, not in the same way that he did, but from the same perspective. They'll get locked up. Kids who were demonstrating about Palestine, they will be locked up. And in 8 years' time, someone will come forth and say, well, maybe we made a mistake. It's like, well, you made a mistake at the time. It was clear at the time, actually. I think it's important to properly locate the degree to which there was any risk to him doing that now.
Well, no, it was risk-free, which is why he was able to do it. I think and I don't disagree, it's not enough. I guess it's like in these moments where we are being so lied to and told things that we see with our own eyes, let alone things that happened decades ago, like aren't true. I think that, I think it's a good opportunity to say his name again, and hopefully it will lead to some people like learning a bit about the Back to Africa movement and Liberia. I don't think it doesn't right or wrong or fix an injustice. And it's a reminder of how people with threatening politics, as you've said, were demonized and are demonized to this day, like, and discredited. But I'm glad we got to talk about Marcus Garvey, even though, it's not totally my politics. Thank you for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to support the show, find us by searching Over the Top, Under the Radar on Patreon.
You can sign up to get our newsletter at overunderpod.com.
And you can connect with us on socials at over_under_pod_.
See you next week.